Hey folks, I'm Spencer. On today's episode of Cult Mania, we're looking at Takashi Miike's absolutely batshit Yakuza gore fest, Ichi the Killer. I'm just realising that that description pretty much suits at least 10%, probably like 25% of Miike's films. So, adapted from a manga created by Hideo Yamamoto, Ichi the Killer came out pretty much smack bang in 2001. And this is Miike in his golden period. He's 2 years previously made Audition and Dead or Alive, which are fantastic. He's still flying high on that success. I mean, he makes 7 other films in 2001, I'm pretty sure. He's just firing on all cylinders at this point and churning out a huge amount of his best work. Ichi follows a Yakuza member, Kakihara, played by Tadanobu Asano, whose boss has gone missing and he sets out to find him, although there's no chance of him finding him because he has been murdered, quite graphically. His boss was killed by the titular Ichi, here played by Nao Amori. And from then on, it's pretty much just cat and mouse, who's going to catch who first, with buckets and buckets of gore thrown in. There's some hypnotic suggestion thrown in, buttloads of sadomasochism, and loads of snappy dressing. All the time, while this film gets really weird, really often. Characters in Ichi are all fantastically bizarre and overblown. I mean, Kakihara is one of the coolest looking, most sort of bizarre, energetic, unpredictable anti-heroes I can think of in anything. I mean, just look at how cool he can be. And then add on to that the fact that you literally never know what he's going to do. I've seen the film before and there are things that just surprise me. And it's brilliant playing him off against Ichi because they are, without trying to spoil anything, they are so completely different. But those two characters aren't the only cool characters. I mean, there are so many just bizarre, weird, like Yakuza characters, or just people who aren't actually Yakuza and are just as weird, actually. I mean, Shinya Sakamoto turns up as a sort of nefarious background character. He's not the only awesome Japanese director who turns up. Sabu, who directed Danganronpa, he's in here as this sort of failed cop. You have Alien Sun, who, I don't think that's her real name, is the sort of main female character in this, Karen. And I guess they gave her the name Karen because she speaks English for most of the film. It's quite strange. But she is awesome and she gives a really great performance. Actually, everyone in this gives a great performance because even if they don't they don't look like a normal human or act like a normal human, that doesn't matter because this film's that insane that it doesn't really matter. Before I move anywhere else, I have to give a shout out to Michiko Kitamaru, who did the costume design on this film, because oh my god, this film has the best costumes ever. I'm not open to arguing on this. I mean, Kakihara's wardrobe, if they sold a line of clothes that was just everything he wore, I would probably be bankrupt because I would have bought it all. I mean, I've done my best to sort of try and match the style here, but I mean, this isn't cool enough to go in Ichi. I mean, it's not just Kakihara that has great costumes, but he does steal the show because everyone else just doesn't have the flamboyant patterns and iridescent clothing and ridiculous amount of ruffles that just turn up on his clothes. It's just the coolest outfit set, wardrobe, whatever ever. The film's visuals as a whole, though, are just fantastic. I mean, this is a film that is so crazy that you don't think cinematography is really going to keep up with it, and yet it does. I mean, you open with just a camera barreling through the streets. It spins round characters, you're cutting everywhere. It does a lot of sort of rushing around. You get these fantastic sequences where you are, I was about to say cutting between slow motion and normal speed, or hyper speed and normal speed, but you're not. They're all done in one shot. The slow motion bits especially are so cool, because like people are running and then they slow down and the sound goes. It's so cool, and it's such a colourful film as well, not just in the fantastic costume design, but you know, you get lots of cool neon, you get lots of bits where you go into bars and they just look so cool. This era of Japanese film really has a style, and I do think it's a shame that this Blu-ray restoration didn't get to be done from the original negative. It's an interpositive, but I think that's because there are lots of digital effects used in the film, which I presume were done later, so they would have to redo them. The sound design as well, I'm going to say it again, it's so good, because everything is pushed to the absolute maximum level it can. Any sort of punch or squelchy bit of gore, you know, intestines hitting the floor or whatever, it's just accompanied by the most sort of overdone sound effect that would sound cartoonish in any other film, but everything that's happening in this film is so over the top that the sound has to be as well, and it works so incredibly well. But to be honest, it's the soundtrack that steals the show here. Created by Carrera Musication, a sort of side project from the experimental, very noisy rock band Boredoms, it is absolute madness. I mean, you've got sort of jazz instrumentation, there are bits of techno, really sludgy guitars, random bleep bloop noises, some sort of high-pitched babbly vocals or other weird vocal. It's basically, if you took everything that's ever been in music ever and threw it into one soundtrack, congratulations, you have the Ichi The Killer soundtrack. I just think the great thing with this soundtrack is that you never know what you are going to get next, and that perfectly suits the film, because what crazy gore sequence is going to come up next. And speaking of that gore, there's rather a lot of it here. And I mean, the practical effects are absolutely top notch. I mean, one of the most famous parts of the film is that they have a guy suspended on hooks, and it still looks fantastic, but that goes for pretty much everything in the film. You know, okay, there's probably like a fake head here or there that don't look amazing, but the impact is still there. I mean, the film really does go for gross out. I mean, to the point that Miike has said that some fluid that appears at the start of the film is real, which, if so, is a bit grim, but it kind of tells you that they were willing to go the extra mile to make this film as gross as it could be. Where the sort of gore is perhaps a little bit let down, there are a couple of sequences where they use CGI to like fling blood around or to put blood on the ceiling, stuff like that. That doesn't always look great. I don't imagine it looked great in 2001, to be honest, but it's used fleetingly, so it doesn't really matter, and in a way it's kind of got a cheesy charm to it because it's that bad. Now, this just brings me on to the fact there is a lot of violence and a lot of torture. There is quite a lot of sexual violence. If that is something that you do not like, do not watch Ichi. because it happens frequently enough and it's tied to the plot, so it's not something that was ever going to be particularly easy to edit out or to work around. It's not like you can leave the room for one scene. But you're going to have to bear with me on this because there is a lot and it is quite difficult to put up with. And, you know, the violence as a whole is very disturbing. But I think the film pulls it off because of how its tone works, and I think the messaging behind the film. Now, the film can be a heck of a lot of fun. It really is bananas. It throws so much at you. It can be really funny. It can be really exciting. The gore, there are plenty of points where you'll be seeing the gore and you'll just go, what? And then there are plenty of times that it's really quite disturbing and really uncomfortable to watch. Now, I know that a lot of people aren't particularly happy with colliding distress and funny gore moments, or just slapstick humour at points. But I think it's important to why Ichi the Killer works. I mean, nearly every character, well, every male character in this film is some sort of, you know, toxic masculine stereotype who is often doing horrible, horrible things to people because they can, because they derive pleasure from doing so. It doesn't even have to have much of an end a lot of the time. And I think the violence in the film works in a very similar way because obviously, you know, gore, you're watching it because, you know, you want to see the effects and you want to go, ugh. But then, you know, you start off with bad things happening to bad people, and then slowly bad things start happening to innocent people or to people that you like. And it makes you realise that this isn't going to work out, you know, this isn't going to go well for anyone. And I think it's the fact that you go from having a fun time to thinking, oh my god, this is horrible. It's all to do with representation of violence on screen. I think this is similar when the sexual violence is on screen, similar to when I discussed Cannibal Holocaust. There's a lot of people watching these things happen, people taking gratification from seeing these things happen. There's a key sequence that is put in like a VHS style or like crap digital footage, and I think that, you know, points heavily at the sort of Japanese pink film market, and it's Miike sort of criticising how sexual violence is used in that and how that could warp people's perception. Well, that's what's happening in that sequence. I can understand people finding just the mix unpleasant, and I can understand people finding that it doesn't work for them. But I think for a gore audience, who are perhaps the people who Miike wants to get the message to, I think that's the thing. It's aimed at people who have a tolerance for this sort of stuff, pointing out, ain't this weird? Without ever seeming judgy. I have to say, you know, I love Ichi the Killer. I imported this version so that I could see it in full. I just think it's great, and I think it's Miike's best film. It's one of my actual just favourite films. And I can understand why people would absolutely hate it with a passion. I think it's crazy just amounts of blending stuff together. It's one of the few films where I think everything slots into place perfectly. It just works. And I do think that while you can watch it just for the spot, I think the messaging behind it is prominent enough and hits you enough that it... No, I'm not going to say it gets away with it because that defeats my argument. It works. It does everything just right. But I can completely understand people hating it. To which, what do you think of Ichi the Killer? Have you seen it? What do you think? Do you think it's just exploitation trash, or do you think it's got a high meaning? If you have seen it as well, let me know down in the comments what you think the ending means, because I'm not going to give anything away, but it's a very weird ending, and I want to know what people think is happening. Anyway, like and subscribe so you don't miss any more of my videos, and I shall see you next time.